Hi folks, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Payal and I am a traveler who also loves to meet people. And I think a blend of both is where this concept of melting pot has come about. In my Melting Pot series, I will be talking to lots of inspiring people from different parts of the world and also from different cultures, whom I meet during all my travels. The common factor between these folks will be the desire to follow their passion and make it a way of life. So step into this melting pot and enjoy the chats. Hi folks, welcome to another episode of Melting Pot. This one is a bit unusual and different. Reason being that I'm talking to, my guest today is someone that I know absolutely nothing about. So normally I do, some research, and then as we go along, the conversation just flows. But in this case, I have no background, and which is why I'm excited. You, my listeners, are going to learn a lot more about my guest along with me. So,
the jury's out on that. We'll see.
Okay, all right. So there you go. He's already started. I'm talking to Rishabh Chawla today, and I'm really, really excited, like I said, about this conversation.
Oh, dear.
So thank you, Rishabh. And I think I'm just going to hand the mic over to you.
Well, no pressure.
No pressure. So what's your story?
Okay, thank you for having me. So at this point now in 2020, it has been 11 years since I entered the poker industry in India.
Okay.
When I first started, it's a fun little story about how I got introduced to the game.
Right.
I used to live in the US I was going there for college.
Okay.
And I just moved back to India.
Okay.
And I have always not been a big fan of card games in general.
Right. Oh my God.
Ironically.
Okay.
And I still remember it was May of 2009. My younger brother and I, Rahat, we were on a hiking trip in some remote corner of Himachal, in the Himalayas. And we were staying in this cabin and there was no electricity.
Okay.
And we was just supposed to be there for that one night.
Right.
And the only thing I enjoyed as far as card games was concerned was Uno. I loved Uno. I thought there was a strategy to it. Strategy is something that attracts me no end.
Right.
And we couldn't find the Uno cards because, lack of light. So he'd gotten introduced to poker recently and he said, okay, well, there's this amazing game I have to teach you. I think you're going to enjoy it.
Yeah.
And after much reluctance was overcome, he happened to teach me and we played the whole night, and then we kind of ended up playing the whole trip. And we came back, and he was supposed to be in India for the summer. I just moved back, and we ended up playing with some of our friends who already knew about it that whole summer.
Right.
And
so then
that
was basically your introduction to poker. Okay. And so why, you could have done anything else, right? So why did you want to continue with that? I don't think it was a passion for you.
It was, so it quickly ended up becoming one because as I got really deep into the game, because the beautiful thing about poker is it's very easy to learn it, but almost impossible to master it. Because you have to keep making adjustments to it's essentially a game about decision making.
Right.
And for anyone who enjoys strategy, they would absolutely love this game.
Right.
Because it's adjustments that you need to know the basic math of it.
Right.
And then once you know the math, then it becomes all about the feel of the game. It becomes all about how well you're able to have pattern analysis, for example, and how well you're able to understand the thought process of the person that you're playing with, or the people that you're playing with. And you have to, so there's a lot of really fun aspects of the game like that. You have to get into the head of the person that you're playing with and figure out how they would. Yes, absolutely. It's often been said that poker is war with cards.
Right.
It's psychological warfare. Happen to be played with cards.
Right.
And you really kind of have to get into the headspace of the person you're playing with and think about what they would do in this particular situation,
right?
And therefore, what your counter play should be.
Right.
So that makes it really, really interesting because different people think it's played over long hours, for example.
Yeah.
So you have to figure out how they would be thinking now as compared to how they might have been thinking 3 hours back, which might have been different because they are also
So I guess
leveling
they're
up.
in the same
Because exactly
in the same mind, in the same headspace,
exactly.
right? Yeah. Okay.
So they say
yeah.
that there's hundreds of levels in
Yeah.
poker, and
Yeah.
the trick to figuring the game out is figuring out what level your opponent is thinking at that particular point in time, based on his or her capacity for understanding and contextualizing the history that they've had with you so far, because they're also leveling up as they go, and you have to know how much they remember, because it's not just one session. It could be that you play with them frequently. It could be over days, months. There are players with years of history playing with each other. So they are comrades in that they've also leveled up together. And especially if they're friends, because I do have some friends in the poker space, and we play with each other, but then we also talk about why we made the decisions that we made, and then that gets more and more complex. The texture's a lot more rich because now we have to remember the conversations that we had.
Absolutely. Because when you're friends, but when you're actually playing the game, then you're competitive. So that's when that's super interesting. Yeah. Are you a professional poker player?
So I used to be.
Okay.
So quickly after 2009, when I initially learned, I started playing a lot and I started reading a lot. There's a lot to learn about it. And my game started to evolve slowly. And it got to a point in 2010, I believe, where it became where I got to be quite decent at it. Of course, decent is very relative. I'm not amazing at the game or anything. Simply a matter of the fact that poker was very, very new at that time in India. So when I say decent, I really mean relative to the people I was playing with. But in 2010, I decided to play full time, which I did for roughly 2 to 3 years. And towards the end of which, I also started a travel startup, but different story.
Which I would love to hear about as well. So are there tournaments?
Yes.
There are.
There's two basic formats of poker, and the way it is played. There's tournaments in which everyone who's participating puts up a buy-in, an initial fee, and that buy-in is pooled together, and then the top 10% of the field makes 100% of the money of that tournament. And within that top 10%, of course, it's also laddered. It's also structured such that, for example, the person who finishes absolutely stone cold first gets about 20% of the prize pool. Anywhere from 15 to 20%. Most of the time is 20%. So there's a lot of expected value, EV, in finishing very, very deep in a tournament. And not that much, because there are multi-day tournaments. For example, the World Series of Poker, which happens in Vegas in the summer every year. It's a 7-day tournament of 14 hours of play every day. And there's 10 million to first.
Wow. Yeah. So it's high stakes.
It's definitely high stakes. It's super intense. The series is the one event that most poker players either want to play or never miss, depending on.
So where do you fit in?
Well, I mean, I like now at this point in 2019, 2020, I have so many things to do that I hardly get an opportunity to play anymore.
But did you, earlier, when after 2010?
I have traveled a lot. I came back from the US, not that interested in going back necessarily. I don't particularly agree with the politics of the country. Another podcast completely.
Another podcast, But I don't kind of delve into politics. I stay very clear of it. I only talk about, my podcasts are only human stories. So,
sounds good.
Okay. So then?
However, I have traveled quite a bit, but that has been mostly to Europe. And also, I am not a tournament player. Because in general, I feel that tournament players have to suffer through a lot of variance, because there is some variance involved in the game. There is some short-term variance involved in the game. And then it feels quite disappointing if you don't cash in the money, if you don't end up in the money after like a 6-day grind, for example. So the other format, of poker is cash game poker,
Okay.
in which you can buy in for a certain amount.
Right.
The blinds don't increase, the
Right.
stakes don't increase, they stay the same.
Right.
And you can cash out whenever you want.
Okay.
So if you want to play shorter sessions,
Yeah.
or if you want to, it's a completely different texture altogether, because in that you just cash out the chips that you have in your stack at that point of time.
Right. Right.
Unlike the tournament, in which you have to wait till the tournament ends,
Yeah.
or till you have no chips left,
Yeah.
and then how much you get paid is on the basis of where you finished. So completely different
So the
texture,
format's completely different.
and
Yeah.
that dictates how the game is played. Because in cash games, the games are more they're intense in a very different way.
Right.
And there's a lot more dynamic in a very different way, because
Right.
in cash game poker you decide which tables you sit at, but in tournaments that is decided by the tournament director.
Right.
So
Right, yeah.
here you get an opportunity to create a lot of dynamic, a lot of history with the players, and therefore it's a lot more warfare-ish because of the fact that you can buy in for as much as you want, and it becomes more about the battle,
Yeah.
so to speak.
Yeah.
And that is a format that I really enjoy personally. And the full-time poker that I played was mostly cash game poker for that reason.
Okay, that's interesting. So, what is it that you do now with poker? Because you mentioned before we started talking that you have a company.
Right.
So, what does the company do?
So I played full time for 3 or 4 years,
Yeah.
all the way up till 2013, 2014.
Okay.
And then I had this travel startup.
So you played full time only in India, or you traveled as well?
I traveled as well.
Okay.
Most of my play at that time was in India, but
Okay.
I did happen to travel a little. I have a history of backpacking, so that kind of
Nice.
they combined.
Sounds just like me. Okay, so it kind of combines.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like my series. I mean, sorry, but I have to plug it in.
Please.
It's because I am a passionate traveler. I've been traveling all my life, and I love meeting people. So I think just combining the two made perfect sense.
Meant to be together.
Yeah, it was meant to be together. So that's how my podcasting journey. It's not a very. I mean, it's. I haven't really been podcasting for a long time,
Okay.
but I think it's just. Oh my God! It's something that I am just so excited about.
Yeah.
And I've been meeting
Okay.
an absolute range of people, along the way, and I think it's just been incredible. So, sorry, okay.
No, I mean I have this podcast to thank for us meeting. I think it would have been difficult to meet on this trip if it weren't for the podcast. So
so it was meant to be.
Thank you, everyone listening. I appreciate it.
So you said you got into you had a travel startup.
Right. So
Okay.
I did that for a couple of years, but the calling of poker is so strong.
Yeah.
So I knew at that point of time that I did not necessarily want to play full time myself.
Right.
It was around the same time when I stopped playing full time, because poker, cash game poker especially, is quite intense, and it's very long hours. Often it is very long hours at night, and that was something that I wasn't entirely compatible with.
Right.
And it was around the same time that I started dating my now wife.
Okay.
And therefore it was, for the first time, poker kind of took the back seat, and very quickly after meeting her, I knew I definitely wanted to spend the rest of my life with her.
Yeah.
So then it became, that year we traveled a bunch and kind of used up my bankroll for an amazing cause, mind you. That was my investment in terms of time at that time, to just get to know her better, and that was 2013 was an amazing year.
Life,
yes.
Right? So
yes.
So then.
So when I got back to it, I essentially realized that I did not want to necessarily.
You couldn't stay away from it. You couldn't stay away from poker.
Yeah, it's. I guess once you're in it, you're kind of in it for life, because there's so much intellectual stimulation that you get from the game, and from the constant adjustments that you need to make, and there's a lot of math involved.
Right.
So you constantly keep learning.
So clearly, I can't play poker.
Anyone can play. I wanted to get as close to the mic as possible. Anyone and everyone can play. It's simply a matter of the right training.
I guess.
That's all.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah.
That organically brings us to what I do today.
Yes.
In 2016, a friend of mine and I, we decided to start a seed fund of sorts for up-and-coming poker players. That was around the time when we decided, we did not necessarily want to play full-time. We wanted to play part-time.
Right.
And also we wanted to give back to the community who we thought had given us so much.
You're listening to a fusion of stories recounted for the first time ever by some fascinating people from across the globe with me, Payal, on this very unique and special podcast series, Melting Pot. Poker, not community, but the whole idea of poker, had it sort of expanded, evolved in India? Or?
It was definitely on its way.
Okay,
and
so you stepped in at the right time, I guess.
Definitely. 2009, when I started in India, at that time it was very, very nascent. Very few people played.
And did you get like reactions as to how can you be a full-time?
All the time.
You studied in the US and you come back, and how can you...
How dare you? I have a question for you. How dare you?
So, yeah.
But especially from my family. I went through a tough phase with my family in the middle because there was no understanding whatsoever at that point of time. And in general, I feel like families are nothing but smaller fabrics of the society we live in at large. And therefore, often you will have a very similar reaction to what the society at large is going to have. And societies are just a small fabric of the advertising and the media that they consume at that given point of time. So the reluctance of the Indian society, for example, to accept poker, especially in 2009, 2010, was well established. But that reluctance had very little to do with rationale. It had very little to do with logic and much more to do with just just assuming that every single thing that is done with cards is necessarily gambling. Because poker is clearly recognized as a skill game.
Right.
It's chess but played slightly differently with a different set of paraphernalia. But it's difficult to necessarily explain that to your family when you also attach that to, by the way, I play full time.
Right.
So, but what has happened, especially from 2015 was around the time when most online sites in India started. 2014, 2015 was that space when online sites was becoming a big thing in India. And then as these sites became legit corporations with large marketing budgets and they started to advertise in India in mainstream media, which started happening somewhere around the end of 2018, the society at large started to accept poker as a skill game because it was simply a matter of shining that light in that dark spot of their minds where they did not necessarily understand how the game worked, and it was so much easier for them to simply relegate it to the dark ages, so as it were, I mean, I remember a conversation that I've had with a family member where the Pandavs were brought in. Exactly my reaction.
Oh my God.
So that was disappointing. And did not bode well for our relationship. And often, I guess, these kind of moments really define you. The way that you react to these moments, how open a mind you can actually keep at this time, really define you as an individual, as a human being. So I got a deep insight in specific family members and based on how they reacted, because I have a very deep appreciation for people in general who approach concepts, any new concepts, from a space of curiosity instead of a space of pre-made judgment. And that is so important to have, because that is how I personally believe that is how you get to grow as an individual. Keeping that mind open, not just talking about it, but actually doing it. Very recently, I was talking to my mom and we were talking about how spirituality is not practiced in the comfort of your home with the air conditioning on the yoga mat. It is practiced in the middle of conflict. When you feel deeply emotionally about a conversation, and that is the time when you detach, for example. Anyway, I digress.
That's okay. That's okay. We're having a conversation. Remember, a chat, right? So so we talk about. I mean, it can go in any direction. It's fine.
Clearly.
Yeah. So then coming back to
So basically, to answer your question, there was some reluctance to accept, but as there's been advertising and media consumption in India regarding poker and how it is clearly a skill game, that has also pivoted my family in that direction, because they get to see it now on hoardings and TV ads and stuff like that. Yeah. And simultaneously, in 2016, I had started this seed fund, which pivoted into an out-and-out training program, an out-and-out educational platform.
Right.
That brings me to the question that you asked earlier about what I'm doing now in 2020. My business partner and I work full-time on the educational platform.
Okay.
It's called IPPA, Indian Poker Players Association.
Okay.
And it's the largest Facebook group, because that's how it was established back 7 years back by him. Okay. And then we kind of pivoted into making that the platform.
Right.
So we are a training program, an educational platform, and we help new poker players who enter the sphere kind of handhold them a little bit, and also help them understand how the industry works and what are the things there that you should know in terms of playing the game, and also in terms of capitalizing on promotions that sites might be running. We also work with sites. So it's a combination of a marketing platform as far as sites are concerned, as well as an educational platform for the poker players at large.
So is there like a lot of interest now? I mean, are there a lot of young people who are looking at playing poker professionally?
Yes, absolutely. So it's quite interesting how in the last few years, if someone asks me what I do and I tell them, I can see that change come over their expression, where earlier it used to be something like, okay, well, I have no idea. And now it is something like, that is so cool. And I mean, I appreciate the compliment. Thanks. It has nothing to do with me. I will take it anyway. But to be honest, if I step back from that, it's interesting to see how that perception has changed, where it's gone from them not knowing or them having a somewhat negative judgment to now associating the game with something really, really cool and something cool to do. And that basically has evolved into, therefore, because in general, young people like to be perceived as cool themselves. And this is something that we deal with on a almost daily basis. We find people come to us constantly wanting to get better, which is something we really appreciate. And then there's players who want to do it full time, but they don't necessarily appreciate the amount of work that goes into it. Right. Because a lot of the players who want to play full time often want to just escape the job that they are currently doing. And this is one of our biggest teachings, one of our biggest lessons that we need to impart right before we even start a relationship with a player, is them to fully appreciate and understand how much work goes into it,
and how far would they like to go because of that.
Exactly. And in general, like it is in everything else in life, the more work you put into one thing, the better you get at it is going to be exponential. Your learning is always going to be exponential. So if you do 10 different things, and you only have 24 hours in a day, it's going to for you to hit that hockey stick curve, that learning, for it to become exponential, it will take a lot longer. So we do kind of lay this out to someone who wants to do it full time, just because they've heard from people that it's very glamorous. Nothing glamorous about it.
But I think with anything, whether it's a sport or whether it's poker or anything that you want to succeed at, you have to put in the hard work.
Absolutely.
There's no shortcut. Alternative.
Absolutely. The hard yards are the only way.
Exactly.
And because of the short-term variance that poker entails,
Yeah.
and there being no long-term variance. So there's some luck involved in the short term, but if you keep making the right decisions in the right mathematical spots,
Yeah.
right mathematical situations, basically it will come to a point where you put in a certain number of hands,
Yeah.
and there is no, it all evens out. The math evens out in the long run. So it's really interesting to me to just see as an observer how that affects, how short-term variance affects the mindset of a person.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
the more stable your mindset is,
Yeah.
and the less you care about the money, quote unquote,
Yeah.
so to speak.
Yeah.
And you have to, so something that we tell our students is that you have to think about chips as chips, but not the money equivalent of those
Yeah.
chips.
Yeah.
Because then you will not be able to make the hard decisions.
Yeah.
And it's very important to be able to make the hard decisions, because
Yeah.
that is where the expected value actually hides.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's interesting to see players go through that curve of thinking about life, poker, and therefore life in the short term, because poker is nothing but their mindset is nothing but a reflection of their mindset in life.
Right.
And we help them with that a lot.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it connects to spirituality, and it connects to being stable. It connects to making sure that your mindset is right, which is detach yourself from the results,
Yeah.
be as decision oriented as possible,
Yeah.
and have the faith that in the long term it
Yeah.
evens out. In the
Yeah.
long term, a good decision made over and over again in the same correct situation
Yeah.
is going to be the best decision, and you are going to be able to see that in your results.
And I think that's true for life in general, right? So yeah,
Absolutely. This
yeah.
is the one thing that I appreciate more about poker, and the one thing that poker has taught me over and above everything else is to call it an ability is quite a stretch, to be honest. I'm not there yet where I can call it my ability
Right. Yeah.
to detach, but yes, it has brought me far in that journey of trying as much as possible to detach from the results, not just in poker but in life,
Yeah.
and to have a very hard focus on the decision making process.
Yeah.
And the very interesting thing about poker is because it is played with other people,
Yeah.
so it really increases your EQ,
Yeah.
because you start to get good at understanding how other people think
Right.
and have conversations with them when you're not talking about poker.
Right. Yeah.
Conversations
Yeah.
with them
Yeah.
about life
Yeah.
based on how you think they think. Where it's no longer a game, but just an interesting way to get to understand someone else's perspective
Yeah.
in anything.
Yeah. Interesting. Wow. So you who's kind of created the training programs? Have you done
Both
it? Your partner and
my business partner and I. My business partner's name is Cloven D'Souza.
Okay.
Both him and I together have created the program,
Okay.
and he now handles the Facebook side of it, the public
Right.
side of it. We are
Right.
currently in the middle of creating a product
Okay.
where we are also going to have these sessions available as sessions that you can view with a membership.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So we are actually in
Yeah.
the middle of doing that. It's also going to be called IPPA.in.
Okay.
And yeah, it's an exciting time to be
Wow,
alive.
Incredible. Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. I mean, I can see the sparkle in your eyes. So thank you so much, Rishabh. I mean, I've really learned a lot about you, about poker, and I mean, it's just been a very, very fun conversation. So
I feel the same way. Thank you so much for talking to me.
Thank you. Thanks. I learned a lot about poker in my conversation with Rishabh. Honestly, I never really expected my chat with him today would be all about poker. And a footnote here, despite his reassurances, I am still not convinced that I would ever be able to play the game with all the strategy and the math and all of that involved. To me, Rishabh and his partner are most definitely game changers, when especially it comes to poker in India. Isn't it so fascinating to listen to and learn about all the diverse and interesting things that people embark on today? For more such captivating stories, do continue tuning in to Melting Pot. Until the next one, this is